that are labeled as failing, and we're talking about parent involvement. Where in that whole scheme of things do you think charter schools play a role? Do you feel that they offer parents a real choice?
Okay. Wow, that's $1 million question. Okay. Charter schools. All right. So the gentleman in front is going like this, right? Okay. So the animating idea for charter schools, okay, came from Al Shanker, all right? He had a great idea, which was to create spaces for innovation. And by the way, you know, the progressive small schools movement was very kind of charter-like in its origins, okay? But again, what you had was the takeover of this positive idea. One of my chapters, which we haven't even touched on, is on New Orleans. And what happened in New Orleans is, yes, you had a takeover of the local schools. You had the firing of seasoned educators of a large swath of the city's African-American middle class, a takeover by out of town, often out of state, big philanthropy-backed ed reformers. You know, bright young things, mostly white young teachers from TFA coming in to substitute as scabs, okay? I'm going to call it what it is. And most of this, and it's a two-tier education system, by the way, in New Orleans. You have the quote-unquote successful schools, which were richer, whiter, et cetera, that remained part of the Orleans Parish School Board, and then you had the majority of schools which were taken over by the state, okay, and they were poor and African American, okay? And what you saw was the CMOs, the KIPPs of the world, and KIPP-like schools came in. And by the way, there's a place for schools like KIPP, no excuses charter schools. I'm sure they do well by some kids, okay? They came in and they took over all the schools, the non-selective schools. So was there choice? If you were poor and African American and couldn't get into one of the selective schools, did you have choice? Not really. You went to a no excuses charter school where your chances of being suspended, expelled, etc., and ending up in the criminal justice system were way higher. And one of the things that I document in my book, which Diane Ravitch, by the way, has called the best sort of narrative on what happened in New Orleans, is the many efforts, community-led efforts to create local charter schools and how they fared under this charter regime, this corporate-led charter regime in New Orleans, okay? And this is not just happening in New Orleans, okay? You now have the city plan, which is led by a former hedge fund guy from Enron and the head of Netflix, and they are going to spend, I think it's $250 million to bring the portfolio model to 40 cities across America. And you have Eli Broad, who was going to take over the public schools in Los Angeles. The brakes have been put on him a little bit because of the teacher strike and because of the backlash over how much money was being drained out of the public schools to go into the charters. So I think in some ways, if we can use that businessese, is ever going to recover from this. But the original animating idea was not such a terrible idea. The idea of doing innovation on a community level, right? That's not what it's become. I'm sorry, I really got long. I got kind of carried away there.
No, we can always get carried away when our charter schools are found.
Right.